Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is internationally syndicated solely due to the love and support that you all continue to give. We're available across all major distributors, and as long as you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in, because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Lorin Zaner. And we're going to be discussing his amazing book, The Making of Darth Zaner. Listen, I'm liking the title. It is very catchy. And I promise you, the words found on those pages, they're just as entertaining, all right? You want to sit back, strap in, head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the regular online book resellers. Pick up your copies of this amazing book today. Before I go any further, I want to point out the fact that Lorin was brought to us by one of the best publishing firms in the business, people you already know, talking about City of Books. So for my writers out there who have gone through their process and now you need some help moving that masterpiece you just developed, well, look no further than City of Books, people, because they're one of the best movers in the business. You're going to want to head on over to cityofbooks.com and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. People, trust me when I tell you, man, it is an absolute pleasure to have Lorin here on the line. Step inside the courtroom of Lorin Zaner, where justice is a high-stakes gamble, and the line between hero and villain blurs with every verdict. In The Making of Darth Zaner, this battle-hardened defense attorney pulls no punches. Man, he is revealing the shocking strategies, moral tightropes, and raw truths behind defending the accused. You know, this is something that I find remarkably compelling. It really is an episode of Law and Order brought to life, or really copy and paste any other crime mystery you want to put in there. This is something that I promise you is going to leave you at the edge of your seat. It is a gripping memoir that you are not going to be able to put down. Zaner's story is a masterclass in survival, strategy, and even the dark art of criminal defense at times. If you are ready to see the law like you've never seen it before, this is a book for you, all right? The defense rests, but the conversation is just beginning. Sit back and strap in. Lorin, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Likewise, man. Listen, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm looking forward to picking your brain and learning a little bit here. Lorin, before we go into this amazing book, I want to start first and foremost by learning a little bit more about your background. Now, of course, we already know what this book entails, so we got that. But tell us a little bit more about who is Lorin Zaner.
Well, I come from probably a lower middle class family. They instilled in me education, work hard. Mm-hmm. I worked throughout high school. You know, I sold magazines door to door. I worked in the grocery store. I worked in factories, anything to make a buck. I worked hard in school. My background is I'm a chemical engineer. I worked for Owens Corning Fiberglass for a few years. 3 of us left and formed our own environmental consulting firm, which did well for the first year. In fact, that's when I actually published my first book back then, and decided I needed to get more education, which gave me the options of possibly a PhD in chemical engineering, a master's in business, or a law degree. Every article I would look at in the newspaper would talk about law. So law seemed to make the most sense, and it gave me a lot of options. And somehow I became a trial lawyer.
Well, listen, I'm curious about that transition here. Well, before rather than talk, because there's so many other questions that I want to get into, and thank you for the background. Quite impressive, by the way. So congratulations on all the accomplishments. I want to go now into the inspiration of the book, but also the title, because the title is something very intriguing. Of course, you know, The Making of Darth Zaner. All right, so we got the play on words here, and from a pop culture standpoint, you know, there's a lot of appeal there. But that title And of course, for people that know and are familiar with Darth Vader, well, it signifies a transition, a transformation. And in Darth Vader's sense, he goes from being one of the good guys to falling into the line of, or being viewed as a villain. Talk to us about this title, the inspiration behind creating the narrative, and why you chose all of this to be a representation for your book.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank my lovely wife, Eileen. She came up with the name of the book, and I really appreciate it. And it seems to resonate, at least with people that have bought the book so far. Mm-hmm. How we came up with the name, I represented a police officer who was charged with sex trafficking of minors. The case proceeded to trial, and he was found not guilty. One of the women involved with sex trafficking group and the victims of sex trafficking came up to me afterwards and said, "Lorin, we have a name for you." And I said, "What's that?" She says, "Darth Zaner." So that's where it came from. I was given that name by someone who obviously wasn't real happy that the police officer was found not guilty, but I loved it.
There you have it. Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit more about this book and some of the cases that we're going to be greeted with once we pick it up.
Well, my practice was different than most lawyers, especially today, in that I have done all kinds of things, from major high-profile criminal to domestic to personal injury to civil litigation. And so when people ask me what I do, I essentially say I'm a trial lawyer, because I've tried probably thousands of cases in all different kinds of areas of the law. Part of the reason I wanted to write the book is, one, I spent so much time away from my family, learning and preparing and doing all the things that I did, that I thought it would be something that they would like to see, so they would know a little bit more about what I did. Mm-hmm. And also, I think there's a lot of pointers that I make throughout the book that can be of assistance to people that go into law. There's a lot of really interesting stories, some pretty funny stories. And I talk about, obviously, not all my cases. I didn't keep notes when I was doing these things, so I'm actually amazed that I remembered as much as I did in almost 50 years of practice. But I remembered a lot. I've had lots of experiences, and I thought it would be interesting for people to see them and for me to share them with people.
Yeah. Lorin, I think something that is remarkably compelling, especially from a defense lawyer's perspective, right, is because, again, you're defending a lot of different clients. And from a public perspective, sometimes that particular individual doesn't look like the good guy, doesn't look like they should be freed, right? In the example that you gave before, I'm sure with that police officer, especially from a public perspective, there were a lot of, you were on the fence. There were a lot of people with opposing views. Your book argues that everyone deserves a defense, regardless of circumstances, right? And I'm right here with you. I believe in that wholeheartedly. I'm curious to know, throughout your journey, were there any cases where you secretly, and of course it has to be secret, because listen, if you're hired to defend someone, whether your personal beliefs are against it or not, you're there to do a job. Well, were there any cases where you secretly questioned whether you were on the right side? And how did you handle that tension?
I always thought I was on the right side, because guilt or innocence is really not the issue. It's whether or not the state can prove somebody is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And if you believe in the Constitution, which I clearly do, everyone has a right to be represented. Everyone has a right to have their constitutional rights protected. And that's my job. It's not my job to find somebody guilty. It's my job to represent them to the best of my ability, which includes filing motions if necessary, to get them off on what people hate, technicalities. But it's not really technicalities, it's the law. And personally, I'd rather have 100 guilty people walking the street than to have one innocent person in prison. And I know for a fact that I have had people that I'm pretty sure were guilty be found not guilty, but I also have had the opposite, where people that I'm convinced are not guilty being found guilty. And there's nothing worse than to be faced with that kind of situation when somebody you're convinced is not guilty and they go to prison. It's very demoralizing and difficult to handle.
Lorin, we've all watched these movies or these television series where we see a courtroom, a court setting, and we see the attorneys going after it, and then all of a sudden something comes out, or someone pulls out a tactic that really just kind of comes out of nowhere and catches it. As a defense attorney, in your years of experience, have you ever outmaneuvered a prosecutor so completely that it felt less like law and more like a psychological warfare that was being implemented because you just understood and were able to see the playing field way before they did?
I know that I have done that in cases. I can think of a specific custody case that I had where the situation was my client was in California, had the child. The mother was nowhere in the picture, and the child ended up being taken, no idea where the child was at. My investigator got involved, and he contacted me. They found the child in Toledo at a daycare facility, and if anybody has seen the Pelican Brief, when Julia Roberts goes to the psych ward to go and talk to someone and they distracted the workers, that's exactly what we did. Mm-hmm. We got the child out of the daycare facility, all over the news. Child's been kidnapped from a daycare facility, and everybody went absolutely crazy. The FBI was involved, but we outsmarted everyone and got my client back to California with the child. And what we did is we had him file a complaint in California for custody, and we served the mother here in Toledo, and the mother's lawyer told her to ignore it. Well, that was stupid. So the court in Toledo schedules a hearing, and I go to the court with a court order from California that says, 1, my client's the father, 2, my client has custody, which means this court has to give full faith and credit to the California order, and the court had no jurisdiction to do anything. The other lawyer was mad as hell, called me a bunch of different names, but totally outsmarted him because he was so stupid. And my client got custody and kept custody.
There you have it. People, I'm telling you, I'm trying to pull them all out here, but I know I got to stop, right? I understand that. Benji, this is not about you. People, you understand. The book is called The Making of Darth Zaner. You got to head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Type it into a search bar, and you're going to be greeted with a whole host of places. Pick up your copies today. This book is incredibly entertaining, and understand that it all is coming from not only a knowledgeable place, but from real-life circumstances. You're not going to find something like this on the Hollywood screen. This is remarkably compelling. As we begin closing out of here, Lorin, I'm curious, after all of these years working as a defense lawyer, do you still believe in the system in place, or is it something that could require some, maybe a facelift, right? Could require some very intricate uplifting in certain areas. Talk to me about that, because again, you're able to see things on both sides. So I can't just blanket it and say the justice system is a game and it's not truthful. But I also know that there are some pitfalls that happen. So do you still believe in the system, or are there changes that you feel need to be made?
Well, the system clearly is not perfect. Mm-hmm. Innocent people get found guilty. Guilty people get found not guilty. But there's really no better system that, at least that I'm aware of. Possibly one of the things that might be better is, at least in Ohio, the judges are elected by the public. So you get into personality issues, and you have judges who are more worried about what the electorate thinks as opposed to maybe what the law is, which can affect their decisions. So maybe there should be a better way to select judges based on merit as opposed to personality contests. Other than that, I think that's the one part that I would like to see change. But I think some places do that. I know my daughter-in-law, who's from Spain, her brother is a judge in Spain, and they're selected, and they don't run based on merit, and they take a bunch of tests and training and stuff. And maybe that's what we should do here, as opposed to voting on them, at least for state judges, which is what we do.
I think that's a great point. I think that's definitely a valid concern. My final question for you, if you could pass down one lesson from your career to the next generation of defense attorneys, what would that be?
You have to put in the time to learn so many different areas. Don't just go into a case and say, I'm going to plead this person. I always went into a situation to represent someone with the position is we're going to trial and I'm going to learn everything I need to know. In fact, in one case, I'm cross-examining a coroner and she says, Mr. Zaner, you sound like a forensic pathologist. I said, thank you. Please answer the question. So you have to spend the time to learn the science, to learn the law, to learn the rules, and then learn the facts and circumstances about the case. Many lawyers write out their opening statements and closing statements. I didn't do that. I'd have maybe an outline. I just want to get up there and talk from the heart, and because I know my case, and I can do that in my jury trials, and that's what I did.
Well, listen, it reminds me of the old adage, practice makes perfect, right? Whatever your craft is, and this goes much further than just defense attorneys, although this is what it was made for in terms of your statement. Anything that you're doing, anything that's worth doing is worth doing well. And you want to make sure that you're doing the proper amount of research and preparation ahead of time to be able to have the confidence to go and do it in that way. I think that's a great piece of advice, Lorin. Thank you for sharing. And like I mentioned, people, you could take it and you can copy and paste it into anything that you're doing, not just for law. People, head on over and pick up your copies. Like I said, I could sit here, I could talk to Lorin for hours, man. We've barely scratched the surface. There is a lot more left on those pages. You got to head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and purchase your copies today. One last time, it's called The Making of Darth Zaner by Lorin J. Zaner. Head on over there today. Pick up your copies. Lorin, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you. Thank you very much.